Good morning and welcome to First Edition, the online ministry of First Community Church. My name is Glenn Miles. I'm the senior minister here in this amazing congregation, and we are thrilled that you've joined us on this day for worship. We want you to know, no matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcomed and accepted here as you are. Right now, there's a QR code up on the screen. We'd love for you to capture that code, click on the link that appears, register your attendance, submit a prayer concern if you have one, and even give for the offering if you choose to do so. We would love to hear from you. Today, I begin a new sermon series for the season of Lent titled The Shape of Love. We're looking at the life of Jesus and the life of the church really through the lens of the cross. We're going to meditate and consider what the cross means for us in this moment called now. In fact, we're really going to consider in this sermon, what would it mean if for the season of Lent, we gave up the love of power? That's a quote from Brian Zahnd, a very good theologian and pastor. What would it mean if you and I gave up the love of power for Lent and instead followed in humble weakness in the way of Jesus? I'm glad you're with us for worship. Let's go together now to that very place.
An interest in the Savior's love. As you can see from the slide before you on the screen, we're beginning a new sermon series titled The Shape of Love. It's inspired by a book written by a pastor named Brian Zahnd, Z-A-H-N-D. Pastor Zahnd is a very good theologian as well, and what he's written is a poetic meditation on the cross of Jesus Christ. And so he invites us, and this is what we're going to do during this season of Lent, is we're going to take a poetic journey to the cross, to examine and review who Jesus is and how Jesus might be speaking to us in this moment now. I'm looking forward to sharing this sermon, and before I do, let's ask God's blessing upon our hearts and minds in this place. God, reveal to us as we undertake this journey again and again and again your universal and undying love. May that love and your grace inspire us to follow Jesus, to pick up our own crosses and follow him to Jerusalem and beyond. Amen. What does the cross tell us about God? What does the cross say to us about God? What does it reveal? Those questions are unusual ones for American Christians to ask. We tend to ask questions like, what does the cross mean to me? We make it personal. What does the cross mean to me? That's not necessarily a bad question, but Pastor Zahnd on this day wants us to go a step further than our own personal understanding to ask, what does the cross reveal to us about God when we see Jesus on the cross, naked, abandoned, tortured, dying? What does that reveal to us about God? Now, as I was growing up as a child, that question never came up. In fact, the way we represented the cross was as though it was a mechanical and transactional action by God given to us to make a right decision. Now, when I was in the third grade, no Sunday school teacher said, let's carefully study the transactional, mechanical action of God through Jesus Christ. Never heard it like that. But that's what they were describing in language that a third or fourth grader could understand. And by the time we got into junior high and high school, it was clear that's what the teaching was here is the cross of Christ. Jesus was crucified, dead, buried, and resurrected. Do you believe that? If you do, you're welcome to heaven. If you don't believe this, then you'll be sent to hell. This morning at the 10 o'clock service, we have two transepts. We have a left side and a right side that are in cruciform style, is the way the sanctuary is designed. I had to say to the people sitting over here, I'm not saying that you all are in hell. I had to be careful about that. But that's the question that we were told. That's the way it was presented to us as young people, and even into young adulthood. I heard this message many, many times until I graduated from seminary and went in a new direction in my own faith and practice and understanding. But it was given to us as this mechanical, transactional kind of action. God has done this. What do you do? Do you believe or not? Because if you don't, you'll be sent to punishment. We heard over and over again that you are a sinner who deserves to be punished. Sometimes it was said more gently than that. Sometimes it was spoken in a soft voice, but the message was clear. You're a sinner and you deserve to be punished. You remember the sermon preached in 1741 by Jonathan Edwards? We are sinners in the hands of an angry God. And what Jonathan Edwards was saying more than 200 years ago, that we are sinners in the hands of an angry God, and you better be careful or God is going to smack you. The message was clear. This is, in some ways, a uniquely American interpretation. And in fact, it's only in the last 200 years or so that this idea has permeated Christian faith. That's what I heard growing up. You are a sinner in the hands of an angry God. You are a sinner. All of us are sinners, and all of us deserve to be punished. It was a very, very clear message. And look who the primary actor is in this. Here's the cross. Here's what we're taught. Jesus was eventually resurrected. Do you believe it? Yes or no? Because if you say no, you're in this way. God sets it up, and then ultimately it's up to you and me to make the right decision. Who's the primary actor in salvation as is defined in that idea? Us. No, and 1,000 times no. Ultimately, we believe in this church. We understand in this congregation. We understand that God's love is eternal, and it's God's desire to bring all of God's children into God's loving presence now and forever. I was not taught in Genesis that what Genesis 1 says when I was a kid growing up. Do you remember what Genesis 1 says about the sixth day of creation? God has created everything that is. By the way, Genesis 1 is not science, it's poetry. God has created everything that is. On day 6, male and female human beings are created. God looks at them and they are very good. Very good. Jesus says in the Gospel of John, when I am lifted up, he's talking about the cross, when I am lifted up, I will draw all to me. I will draw everyone to me. No one will be left behind. I will draw all. John chapter 3 says, for God so loved the world. For God so loved. John 3:17 says that Jesus was not sent to the world to condemn it, but to save it. I believe in God. I believe in the salvation action of God, that God will make sure all of us, in whatever way necessary, to bring all of us into the life of God's eternal love. I also believe that that word save and understanding the word salvation is about life today, right now. That what God is doing is inviting us to be fully alive in this moment. Let God take care of what happens after death, but in this moment now, be alive. I'm reading a book with some friends, written by a couple of theologians who are playing with the idea of flourishing within the Spirit of God. And we're working on what exactly that means, but part of what I understand it to mean is that to flourish is to be fully alive now. When you see the Greek word for salvation or to be saved, it means the same thing, to be alive now. In antiquity, in the Hebrew understanding, and even in the earliest days of the church, salvation was as connected to life now as it was to anything in the future, after our death or not. And yet, even for folks who have accepted that kind of theology and see God's love as gracious and given to all, sometimes, and I'm one of those, sometimes have a hard time turning off those old tapes. Words we heard when we were a kid. You're a sinner and deserve a punishment. I mean, you don't have to have a degree in primary or secondary education, do you? Do you understand what will happen to a child if you tell him or her over and over again, you're a bad kid, you're a bad kid, you're a bad kid? What eventually is going to happen to them after years of that? They're going to believe they're a bad kid. They may even take some action to prove that it's true. I could count almost up to 100, the number of conversations I've had with people in various churches I've served over 40 years who have sought help through pastors, friends, therapists even, to deal with those old tapes and how to get over the idea that somehow they are not loved and accepted by God, that they are a sinner in the hands of an angry God. Many of those folks, as I said, have gone to therapy. I can't give you their names because it's pastorally confidential, except for one, and one of those is me. It's painful for so many to hear those old tapes playing over and over again. It's that transactional, mechanical way of understanding. I mean, think about this. Even some of our Christmas carols, one in particular that I'm thinking of this morning, underlines this kind of terrible theology. Do you know this one? You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why, because Santa Claus is coming to town. You know that carol better than you know the Bible. He knows when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. Do you see what kind of a God is described there? This is like some kind of referee in a black and white shirt with a whistle up in heaven, looking out at everyone in this room and everyone else around the world, just waiting, keeping track to see, oh, you made a mistake there, technical foul, I'm sending you to hell. That's meant to be funny, thank you very much. And it's not, because for too many of us, that's our view of God. that he is this bookkeeper God, that God is this bookkeeper God, this referee with the whistle who's ready to call us out of the game, to send us into the locker room, to send us into eternal pain and suffering forever. And yet the God that's revealed in the cross is something altogether different from that. As I said earlier, we're being invited in this season of Lent to take a poetic journey to the cross of Christ, to that day named Good Friday, when he will hang before us, naked, nailed to a piece of wood. What do we see when we find ourselves there? We see a self-giving God, a God who gives up God's very self for us, who enters into our dying. That's the idea of what Paul says in Philippians chapter 2. It's implied in Jesus' metaphor of the good shepherd who gives his life for his flock, who enters into our dying, enters into our weakness, and becomes an eternal symbol of self-giving love forever. But it's hard. It's difficult in the United States of America, especially, to accept this idea. You see, we tend to think of Jesus especially as somebody more like John Wayne or Rambo, even if we don't know who those characters are. Where there's a tendency in American Christianity to think of Jesus as sort of our hero, who comes like John Wayne with his 6-shooter loaded, or comes like Rambo with his weapons ready to stoically engage the powers that be, and through violence somehow bring peace. It sounds more like ancient Roman theology about peace through power than it sounds like the Good Shepherd who willingly gives himself obedient unto death, even death on a cross. As I said in the introduction to the scripture readings, it's very difficult. It was hard in Jesus' day, in Paul's day, for his church in Philippi to understand this, and it's very difficult for us here in the United States of America to hear it as well. Many of the church might say, we love Jesus, but he's more like a mascot. Get him off the stage. Get him out of the way. Let's enter this muscular kind of Christianity that's going to rescue and make sure that we Christians have power in the United States. That is as far away from the gospel of Jesus Christ as you can possibly get. What the Bible presents to us is a self-giving God. Listen to this, a portion of a meditation from Brian Zond. Love alone gives meaning to our fleeting 80 sojourn. Why? Because everything else returns to dust. It's love alone that never ends. It's love alone that is greater than the grave. Death severs all save love. We remain connected to our departed loved ones by the unseverable bond of love. From a meditation titled, Love Never Ends, a quote from 1 Corinthians 13, love never ends. But there is this strong movement within the church in the United States that desperately wants to cling to a God that enforces God's rule and enforces God's way of life and will do whatever is violently necessary to keep a hold of that power. You know, in some ways it's related to modernity, to a modern way of thinking. This has only occurred in the last couple hundred years. You see, what modernity has said is things are either literal or they're critical. Let me explain what that means. Literal means the Bible must be literally true, every single bit of it. And if it's not, the whole thing falls apart. That's a modern way of thinking, believe it or not. This has only come into our thinking in the last 150, maybe at most the last 200 years. We've got to prove that the Bible's literally true or else the whole thing falls apart. Well, if you went to seminary like John and I did, you studied the historical critical method and applied that to the Bible. And John did this, Seth and Mary Kate and Sarah Keens, all of us have studied and learned the historical critical method in one style or another, but more or less on the same foundation. And the problem is, this isn't for John or Seth or Mary Kate or Sarah, but sometimes it's a problem for me. The problem is sometimes we think once we've been able to get the tools to explain why literalism is incorrect, with the questions like who wrote it, when was it written, where was it written, and why was it written, and who was it written to, those kind of questions are part of the historical critical method. Then we can prove that it's not literally true. We can demonstrate the contradictions and the differences over 1,000 years of dozens of writers interpreting their understanding of God in their own particular moment, but in no way is it literally true. The problem I make sometimes is I stay there in that critical place. Failing oftentimes to move to a post-critical, mysterious place where the answers aren't nearly as important as the questions. It's something that this church calls the infinite quest. It's about our desire to be in a deeper, more mysterious, even I would say mystical kind of relationship with God that invites us to ask the questions. And we may find some answers, but oftentimes those answers reveal additional questions. And life then becomes this beautiful journey with this self-giving God. Boy, that's a hard sell in this culture. I know it is. I first encountered the opposite view of that, or this idea of modernity, in my 7th grade science class, believe it or not, with Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown was this marvelous teacher, kind, gracious, caring. He was really old. I think he was 46. He wore a skinny black tie. Remember skinny black ties? And skinny black pants with black shoes. I kind of look more like Mr. Brown now than I did when I was a kid. We called him my favorite Martian because he looked just like the Martian from that TV show. Do you remember that TV show? He had everything but the fake antennas. Sweet man. We had to give a speech at the end of the semester. Everyone had to pick a topic that we'd learned and give a speech on it, 3 minutes long. I got up to give my speech. My hands were trembling. I can still feel them trembling. My voice wasn't very clear. I gave my little speech. When I was done, Mr. Brown said, "Glenn, I'd like you to stay after class." Uh-oh. Everyone left. I stood at his desk. He stood up and he said, "Very well done. I'm giving you an A. You're probably a better speaker than you are a scientist." I took that as a compliment. "Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Brown." He said, "Is your father a pastor?" "I've heard that." "He is, yes." "Is he a good preacher?" "I think he is." "Well, maybe that's where you got some of your skills." Then his face got serious. And he said, "I need to tell you, I'm an atheist. There's no way I could believe that God would let God's son be crucified by those mean and disgusting, power-hungry Romans. What kind of a God would do that?" He said some other things. I don't remember them because I was still stuck when he said, "I'm an atheist." Because what had I learned? Either you believe and you go to heaven, or you don't believe and you go to hell. How could Mr. Brown go to hell? This kind, gracious, loving man who cared for his students deeply, who gave you help. If you did poorly on a test, he'd call you in and say, "Now look, here, I'm going to help you on how to get ready for the next test. Here's a way to study." He loved his kids in that classroom. He's going to hell. That's when these things began to circle in my mind. This cannot be. This cannot be. What is it we see at the cross? What is revealed of Christ, of God on the cross? Let's put some more words from Pastor Zond up on the board. On the cross, we encounter a God who would rather die than kill his enemies. On the cross, we encounter a God who would rather die than kill his enemies. When Christianity in America is converted into this militaristic, power-hungry kind of thing, it's completely misdirected from what the God revealed in Jesus Christ is inviting us to be. Brian Zond acknowledges that this is the beginning of the season of Lent. He did this in a sermon not too long ago. We're at the beginning of the season of Lent, and it's the practice in our church and in other churches around the world, as a matter of fact, to give something up for Lent. You know, some of you have told me that you're giving up chocolate. Others have said you're giving up red meat or alcohol. Some of you have said, I'm giving up exercise and religion. I understand. I'm giving something up as well. But Zond asks, what if? What if we gave up the love of power as we make this journey to the cross? What if we gave up the desire to be in control and in charge and in power, and instead found our own cross, picked it up, and followed Jesus? What if?
Thank you for joining us for worship. I trust that you were inspired by the message and moved by the music. Today, we're putting that QR code right back up there for you again. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't yet registered your attendance, please do so. If you have a prayer concern, please let us know. We would love to be in prayer with you every day this week. And then finally, if you feel moved, consider giving a gift towards our congregation. As you can imagine, it takes quite a bit to fund these ministries, to be able to share the love of Christ around the world. We'd love for you to partner with us as we do that very thing. In the meantime, have a beautiful and blessed week.